Welcome to Wait, What? Let's Unpack That. I'm Shauna Day, and after more than 2 decades in higher education and thousands of conversations with students, parents, professionals, and leaders, I've learned that some of the best insights come from simply sitting down and talking. In this first episode, I'm joined by my longtime friend and higher education professional, Michal Bethea. So, grab your beverage of choice, get comfortable, and join us for the conversation. Thank you so much for agreeing to go on this experimental journey with me.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. So, I'm going to ask you, dear friend, to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I am Michal Bethea. I am a director of application services at Ellucian, the leading higher ed technology company. And I come with over 30 years of experience in higher ed, between higher ed administration and higher ed technology.
Okay, well, let's talk about that 30 years. So, you started your career in higher ed on a campus.
So I started my higher ed career as an assistant director of admissions at our alma mater, Mount Vernon College, which is currently a campus of the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And from there, I went to SCT, Systems and Computer Technology, which was a prior uh, version of my current company, Ellucian. And I was a banner student consultant. And so I traveled around the country implementing banner systems and consulting on the banner system. I then, as family dynamics changed, and I was having my son and no longer wanted to be a road warrior. I came back locally and became an assistant registrar at Gwinnett Technical College here in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and ultimately became the registrar, director of enrollment services, um, and uh, and then also went to a proprietary institution. So I've had, some private, public, and proprietary experience. So I did a few years as a VP of Student and Administrative Services at a music school, Atlanta Institute of Music and Media. And then ultimately, I found my way back into this space, which I love because I love working with colleges and universities and not necessarily at one or for one. I just feel like I can be a lot more instrumental work being adjacent to the institution. So I feel like the impact is great. I can have a greater impact there. So I manage a team that is dedicated to an R1 institution. That's a client of ours.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. So you started in higher ed on a college campus. You moved to tech side, you moved back to campuses, and now back in tech, and you like tech better.
I do.
Tell me why, other than the impact, tell me why.
Yeah, I think that it is corporate, and so it is very different. And so, it's very interesting because as I've hired and mentored colleagues, there's sometimes a struggle between the difference in corporate and higher ed and actually being on a higher ed campus. However, I feel like having come from that environment, I understand the struggles, I understand the goals, um, and I feel like we're in a position to be able to help overcome some of those struggles and to meet those goals. And we can actually kind of get things done in a faster manner oftentimes. And just again, be instrumental and have that impact. if if the institution is on board. So I love that partnership. We get to partner
Hmm.
with the institutions, and
Hmm.
I enjoy that.
So you mentioned the word struggle. So what was one of your struggles coming from like a campus and then going to that side and then maybe even going back?
Yeah. So, a lot of times what I've realized as a consultant is when you're on campus, you don't know what you don't know. And so, a lot of times and particularly even going back to a campus now having, then at that point having had some consulting experience, I'd go on campus and I'd meet with staff and I'd say, well, why do you do it this way? And they'd say, well, that's just the way we've always done it, or that's how I was taught to do it. And I could say, well, have you ever considered doing it this way? Like light bulb comes on. And, just learning how to work smarter and not harder. However, technology and systems, advance fairly quickly, and there are often newer and more efficient ways to do things, and that messaging doesn't always get back to the staff.
No, that makes sense. You are absolutely correct. So, as I think about your career, and I mean, other than you're my friend and I actually know you, there's a purpose to me wanting to have one of my first, second, our second conversation um, about these things in higher education, because not only are you someone with a longstanding career in higher ed, you also have spent time mentoring younger people and you spend a lot of time with people of a different generation than we are. One of the things that I know is a challenge is some of these generational differences and understanding and working with people from different generations, not just backgrounds, but really different generations. Tell me what some of the challenges you've seen.
Yeah. I think that again it goes back to some of the older generations, mine and beyond. So I'm Gen X, and I'd say the Gen X and the boomers. Um, we've been stuck in our ways. We've been used to doing things a certain way. And now here come the millennials and the Z's, and everything is just very fast and automated and almost immediate for them. And they're used to it being that way. And they're not used to necessarily having to go through several steps to get to the end point. And so I'm learning that it's not always necessary to have to go through as many steps. Sometimes, again, we put that on ourselves and it's not necessary. However, sometimes it's necessary to teach them these are the reasons why, because you may jump straight to the end and you don't even know why you got there or how you got there. And so, sometimes it's necessary to understand the why and the how. Um, and so that's been interesting. Also, like I said, just helping. I've helped some of my younger colleagues understand how to navigate corporate and just some of the differences and the fact that things take time. So I've actually learned a lot from many of my millennial colleagues, as well as teaching them different things. So I've also recently had an experience with a young lady who's graduating undergrad this year, and was accepted into a prestigious graduate university. I done a letter of recommendation for her, and she decided to take a gap year. And
Mm.
I'm like, okay, not a problem. And we recently had a conversation about deferring, and I said, well, are you deferring? And she said, well, I would have had to pay, the deposit anyway. So, and I'm not certain that once I finish my gap year, I'm actually going to want to go that path.
Mm.
So, I think I'm just going to take the gap year and see what happens. And so part of me was like, oh gosh, oh, oh. And she said, but I didn't display that reaction. And I'm glad I didn't, because she said that she's gotten that from quite a few people. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that she didn't get that from me. That was my internal reaction. But I also listened to her, and her rationalization and reasoning made sense. I'm actually glad that she's not wasting her parents' money,
Mm-hmm.
and going only to find out that she wants to come out after the fact. She will be working, she will be networking, she will be exploring her area of interest. And in all honesty, she can still always go back to school, whether it's that institution or another.
That
And
is
so,
true.
you know, I was actually proud of her for having thought things through the way she did, for considering her parents in this as well. Um, so again, it was one of those things where I had to listen and not just be opinionated and not jump right
Mm.
in. And I'm glad that I did.
No, that's really good. You're right, because Gen X, although I think it's the best, Gen
Of
X, I
course.
think it's the best. I know that we are very accustomed to having these mental routines that we have gotten from our parents, our family members, our grandparents. So these are the things that we think we need to do. These are the steps. This is the process. This is the way. And we've leaned into that. And, it's been good in some instances. And now we're waking up to something a little bit different. And for some people, it is a struggle, because, again, it was pretty much ingrained in us that this is the step. It's step one, step two, step three. And now we see people doing step 1.5, step 17, step
Yes.
4, step 18. And
And we're
that's
cringing.
right. Yeah. And we're cringing. It's kind of blowing our minds a little bit. But you're right. Everything doesn't have to be difficult. And like, I agree with you where when you say that you can go to school at any point. That is one of the beauties. Like, I'm definitely a Gen Xer, but I do have a little bit of millennial and Z thought process in me, because school is so different than it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Um, you can go to school anytime, anywhere, change your mind, get back in school somewhere else. Is so the process and the availability is there, and very different than it was when we were in school, like, if you missed it, you missed it for the,
Yep.
for the
Yep.
most part. But it's definitely have gotten a little bit easier. But you mentioned gap year. And so we're gonna back it down to my favorite group of people, this coming out of high school group, this very young adult group. I hear gap year a lot, and it annoys me. And it annoys me because I believe that gap years come with a plan. And I'm not talking about the person that you were just talking about. I mean, just in general, I hear people say, "Oh, I'm going to take a gap year." So I have learned to ask people, "Okay, what are you going to do in this gap year?" And
Mm-mm.
sometimes I get an answer, sometimes I get a partial answer, sometimes I get nothing. Because in their mind, a gap year is just taking the time off from high school to college. The gap year, if I'm understanding it correctly from its earlier term, is that you're doing something. You're doing something in preparation. You're either traveling, you're studying, you're researching, you're doing some mission work. There's something happening, not just, "Oh, I don't know what I want to do, so I'm at home."
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
So before there was a term for it, I took an involuntary gap year because as a well, well, I wasn't really a first gen college student, but I was first gen to graduate. So, um, but my parents didn't prepare me.
Mm-hmm.
I was told you need to go to college, but I was not provided with any tools or resources. So I had no plan.
Mm-hmm.
And before I knew it, I graduated high school and I still had no plan. But I had a job.
Okay.
And so I worked. Um, and I, then realized this ain't it. This is not what I want my life to be. And so I developed a plan and applied to colleges, and then off I was. So I took a gap year, but it was not called that at that time, and by
Right.
definition, it probably still would not have been a true gap year,
Yeah.
because I didn't have a plan. I agree with you. I think that it is intended to be a year to plan. Are you returning to college? Are you going to college in the first place? Are you going into the workforce? Even if you are going to travel, you're traveling for what? Are you travel? It shouldn't just be about travel for
Vacation.
leisure, right? It
Yeah.
should be, are you traveling for an internship? Are you traveling to learn, you know, how communications works, in Italy, if you want to be an editor for a magazine over there or something like that, or you want to be a photographer, are you traveling to
Mm,
build your portfolio?
yeah.
So there should be some intention behind your gap year.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Intention. Intention. So let's talk about misconceptions.
Okay.
So, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest misconceptions students and or parents have about college and how it works, especially those that are getting ready for college? And I mean, what is this? This is the month of April. Graduations are starting to happen. Students are getting excited. Orientation season is about to jump off and they're ready. But what do you think some of the misconceptions are?
I think from from the parents' perspective is that they can still be as involved in college as they were in high school. So that is absolutely false. You can be involved with your child. You cannot, however, be as involved with the administration, and the faculty. Um, I think that I think students often think, again, that it would be similar to high school. If they're late on a paper, they can still turn it in later. They can get an exception or an extension. And it doesn't work like that. A deadline is a deadline. Faculty members oftentimes have, hundreds of students in a class whose papers they have to grade. So, no, you're not getting an extension or an
Yeah.
exception. You're getting an F. And it's not the teacher's fault. You have to
Yeah.
be responsible. So I think students oftentimes are not prepared for the full level of responsibility that they have to take on and accountability. That
Mm-hmm.
accountability is really big because oftentimes they're not held accountable in high school. Um, so by the time they get to college, that accountability kicks in, and it's something new and different for many people, for many students. And they're like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah.
I'm
It's
not used to this.
definitely it's definitely a big transition, and you're right. It's a transition for the parents and the students. And I
Mhm.
think people have in their mind an idea of what the transition will look like. I'm going to sign up for my classes. I'm going to go to class. I'm going to take my test. And the parents are thinking we're going to get, a grade report at the end of the semester, and our students will check in with us and let us know how things are going. And yeah, it doesn't look anything like that. And so many people get caught off guard when they realize, hopefully early on in the process, that, oh, this is a different ball game. And I think a lot of students think that high school is college is an extension. It's like grade 13, like an extension of
Right,
high school.
right,
Yeah. So, and I think parents do too, and parents struggle a little bit with taking their hands off of the situation. And the students struggle with letting their parents take their
Yeah.
hands off the situation. It's a weird dynamic because they want to be independent, but so many of them have not been accustomed to being independent.
Hmm.
And so when things get a little tricky, then they try to bring their parent in, or they get their parent to handle things for them. And the parent is running into dead end after dead end because there's a little bit of change of responsibility.
Absolutely. I think, you know, one of the best things that parents could do for their students as they're transitioning from high school to college is, you know, to start some of that, start letting them make the phone calls, make their appointments, get a lot of their stuff together, and just be there for them and help them to answer some of those basic questions. But they still need to do it on their own as much as possible so that it's not a shock to their system when they go away to college. And then you just have to, as a parent, trust that for 17, 18 years, you've instilled certain values and responsibilities, hopefully, into your child. And now it's time for them to go forth with those values. And so you just have to really trust that everything that you've taught them, they will put into play.
There should be a little bit of preparation happening, regardless of whether they're going to college or going into the workforce,
Absolutely.
probably in that senior year. I know senior year is really exciting. It always has been. You know, the parents are excited for all the things, homecoming, prom, all the things. The students are excited. But there has to be, and the preparation isn't just applying for college or applying for jobs or finishing up high school. I think it's a little bit different now. There may be some trust things, solely because I know that a lot of the younger people that I spend time with, in my work in the community and different things, they want to be independent. They want to be independent, but they have no real idea of what that looks like or how to get there.
Mhm.
And that's
I
unfortunate.
think this generation is also this youngest, these newer generations are also afraid of not reaching perfection on the first attempt,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
not being successful on the first attempt, which it just blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm like, you learn from failure, you learn from not being successful on the first attempt. And so, therefore, many of them choose not to even try if they don't think they're going to be successful the first time around.
That's very true. You are correct about that. Um, and I do think it's in this current world that we live in that we see a lot of that, because what we see are these curated type of situations and things. So we are exposed to perfection all the time, because if I had to be in perfection mode when I first went to college, I would not have a college degree, because I was a terrible college student initially. I really was. I hadn't, yeah. Eh, I don't even know. I was a terrible college student. And I mean, I did all the things. I was on probation, I was on warning, I was suspended. I did all of the things in college. But because I had some resilience and people saying, no, get back out there, got to go back, you got to do this, do it this way, try that. That's the reason why I have a college degree or two at this point, because otherwise,
Yeah.
if
For
perfection
me,
was it, mm-mm.
it was high school for me. I had a terrible high school experience.
Mm,
And so with that, when I went to college after my gap year, after my year off, I was determined to do well for
mm,
several reasons. One, I felt like I had to prove to myself that I wasn't who I was in high school, that I wasn't that student, because prior to high school, I'd always been an excellent student.
mm,
Um,
mhm.
And so I needed to go back to that. And two, I didn't want to go back home. So I had to succeed in college because I did not want to go back home. So yeah, it was, I had I was on a mission.
No, that makes
On a
sense. That
mission.
that
And
makes
we
sense.
had to work for our grades. We had to, I remember an English professor and he just said, I don't give out A's. So when I
Right.
got my A minus in his class, because I had to get the minus, right? I knew I earned it though.
Yeah.
I knew I earned it.
Well, that's one of those things. So that is one of those things. I think a lot of students, when we think about what their expectations are, they really, some of them really feel like grades are given, or, I did this, I should get something. I didn't follow all the instructions,
Right.
but
Right.
I should get credit for the few instructions I followed. Have you ever seen that? Do you?
Oh, yes.
Tell us about it.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's the don't I get credit for showing up, for attendance. If attendance is this much percentage of my total overall grade, I should at least have this because I show up every day. It's like, but you don't do anything. You're not turning in anything. Um,
Right.
and I think just kind of going back a little bit to your question about misconceptions, I think for a lot of students, they also struggle when they've been excellent students in high school, top-notch
Mhm.
academics, and they get to college and now and high school was no longer became a challenge for them. It was no
Right.
longer challenging. And now they get to college and it's challenging and they don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
They don't know how to unwrap that challenge instead of just taking it on as such. You
Hmm.
still have that same intellect that you had. Take it up a notch. Meet the challenge. You can do hard things. So yeah, I think that just knowing and understanding that college will be different, college will be challenging. It's meant to be challenging. It should be challenging. But that is so that when you graduate, again, you know that you've earned it.
So you still need those skills that you have from high school, but you're right. You're gonna have to take it up a notch. And for some people, that's a little bit of a shock. All right.
It is.
So let me ask you another, one question. If a parent or a student is watching this and they want to set themselves up for success, what is the mind shift that you would recommend, that one or two pieces of advice? And think about some of the people you know, because we didn't even talk about this. You do a lot of community work. You do
Do.
a lot of community. You spending your time with a lot of people and a lot of young folks and a lot of parents. what
That's very true.
what is the advice or the mindset that you would recommend?
Um, I would say instead of enabling your young person, empower them.
Mm,
Empower them, encourage them, and then trust that what you've poured into them is what they will go forward with. And we need to give our young people the opportunity to try, to explore. It's better if we do it while they're still in our homes.
yeah.
And so then they can go out into the world and it's been tested and tried. But I think, empower them, encourage them, and trust them.
I like that. Empower over enable.
Yes, for
That's
sure.
really good. Empower. And that is very necessary.
Yeah, yeah,
McCall,
absolutely.
we are going to end this.
Thanks. This was awesome, though. I loved
um,
this conversation. Thank you.
there is so much more we could talk about.
For sure.
Um, I will definitely bring you back.
Ooh.
And just in case you all didn't know, McCall, what's the name of your podcast that we will all be listening for?
It is the Grown Girl podcast where permission is not required and validation is granted.
Fantastic. I cannot wait to be a guest on the Grown Girl podcast because I got
Absolutely. I
a
can't wait to
lot
have you.
of things to say. As always,
Thank
appreciate you.
you.
Thank you for joining us for this first episode of Wait, What? Let's Unpack That. I hope something from today's conversation gave you a new perspective, challenged an assumption, or simply gave you something to think about. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might benefit from it. And remember, sometimes the best conversation starts with two simple words. Wait, what? Until next time, take care.